to the African History Network show. It is Sunday, May 2nd, 2021, and we're live. We're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. So share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. We're also broadcasting on 9:10 a.m. Superstation, WFDF on their Facebook page as well. All right, so we know that the Kentucky Derby is ran in May, and the first Kentucky Derby ran in 1875. A lot of people don't know that the first winner of the Kentucky Derby was a 19-year-old African-American man named Oliver Lewis. And we know the Kentucky Derby ran Saturday. And Medina Spirit, the horse Medina Spirit, won the Kentucky Derby. Now, Medina Spirit should never be confused with Funky Cold Medina, okay? Just so everybody understand. Okay, Funky Cold Medina will raise your spirit, but Funky Cold Medina should not be confused with Medina Spirit, okay? There's a little tone loc reference there, okay? But there's a deep, rich history of African Americans in horse racing. Now, when you watch the Kentucky Derby today, you wouldn't know that, right? And I've been, studying this history, dealing with African Americans and the Kentucky Derby and horse racing, going back to about 2011. And when I first started doing this research, I went to the Kentucky Derby's official website. They did not have information there dealing with African American jockeys, okay, winning the Kentucky Derby. Now, what's very interesting is that they had they listed all the winners of the Kentucky Derby, starting with 1875, okay, starting in 1875. And they listed all the names and the names of the trainers. But they didn't have anything saying that these were African American jockeys. So it was a few years ago that they started putting information there on the Kentucky Derby website dealing with African American jockeys. And, 13 of the 15 jockeys in the first Kentucky Derby, which was ran in 1875, 13 of them were African American men. Okay, many of them former slaves. So there's a deep history also between slavery and African American horse jockeys. Okay, so a lot of people don't want to deal with that history either. All right, and once again, this ties into why America needs a massive history lesson. So we'll talk about that today. We'll deal with Black Jockeys Dominated Horse Racing, but were pushed out by racism. We'll deal with how that happened. Also, there was a topic that I wanted to deal with earlier in the week. We did not get a chance to do it. The Griot.com and the Associated Press has an article from April 25th, 2021. Despite racial reckoning, state efforts stall on reparations. Okay, now we've seen different states, California, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, and Oregon, that have Democrats, where Democrats control state legislatures. And we've seen them introduce various bills hoping to revise proposals to study the possibility of reparations, etc. All right. Now, those state efforts have mostly stalled, raising questions about whether they can win enough support to succeed on a wide scale. Now, go back and listen to the show that I did Friday. Okay, that was Friday, April 30th. Friday, April 30th, and Thursday, April 28th. Now we talked about Joe Biden's address to the joint session of Congress. We dealt with all that. We talked about the rebuttal from Tim Scott, Senator Tim Scott, Republican of South Carolina, and we properly framed the rebuttal as well. That rebuttal was the rebuttal that he delivered on behalf of the GOP. Now, even though he agreed with a lot of it, on certain issues, Tim Scott disagrees with his party. Okay, Tim Scott is as far as Republicans go, especially Republicans in the Senate, Tim Scott is at the forefront of police reform, where you have a lot of Republicans in the Senate who don't think police reform needs to take place. And they even said, you even have Republicans in the Senate who have said, because Derek Chauvin was found guilty, this means the system works. Found guilty for killing George Floyd. You have some Republicans now saying because Derek Chauvin was found guilty of killing George Floyd, this means the system works and you don't need police reform. Okay. Senator Tim Scott is leading the effort on behalf of Republicans to negotiate with Democrats, especially the Congressional Black Caucus, when it comes to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Now, what he's proposing does not go as far as it should, but what he's proposing goes farther than a lot of Republicans want and are advocating for. So we went through and dealt with what the statements that were said, as well as the statements from Vice President Kamala Harris as well. And you have Democrats, and even when you read the full statements and listen to the full 6 minute, approximately 54 second interview she did with Good Morning America, and she talks about systemic racism and addressing systemic racism, legacy of Jim Crow slavery, Jim Crow segregation, things like this, as well as the comments from Joe Biden. You read and listen to the full rebuttal from Tim Scott, which is about 14 minutes and almost 15 minutes, and I've gone through and analyzed both of them. Republicans don't even want to acknowledge that systemic racism exists. Republicans don't even want to acknowledge that systemic racism exists. Then when you try to address systemic racism, Republicans are calling that racism. When you try to put policies in place to address systemic racism, Republicans are calling the remedy racism and ignoring the 100 plus years of Jim Crow segregation and redlining and racism. So when we look at what's playing out in states like California, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, and Oregon, and despite a racial reckoning that took place in summer of 2020 behind the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and all this stuff, now when it comes time to actually deal with policies, you have Republicans who are in denial. Senator Lindsey Graham just did an interview last week before Tim Scott did the rebuttal on behalf of Republicans. Senator Lindsey Graham, the senior senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott is the junior senator from South Carolina. Senator Lindsey Graham, former chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, is saying and has said in interviews that systemic racism in America does not exist. Not only does Senator Lindsey Graham say that systemic racism does not exist, but Senator Lindsey Graham is attacking the $5 billion allocated to African-American farmers and farmers of color in the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that was designed to address 100 years of racism and discrimination that farmers of color, especially African-American farmers, have endured, because African-American farmers have lost 92% of their land, almost 12 million acres of land over the past 100 years because of being discriminated against getting loans from the federal government, discrimination from the Farmers Home Administration, going back to the 1930s, all different types of things like this. So then when Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia and Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey put the Justice for Black Farmers Act, when they allocate this money for African-American farmers and non-white farmers into the $1.9 trillion bill, and it passes, now you have Republicans attacking the remedy as racism and ignoring the previous 100 years of racism, especially against African-American farmers. Then, the day after Senator Tim Scott delivered his rebuttal on behalf of the GOP, on behalf of the Republican Party, that was Wednesday, April 28th. Wednesday, April 29th, you know what happened? A group of white farmers filed a lawsuit against the U.S. government claiming discrimination, that they could not take advantage of the loan forgiveness that farmers of color are being able to take advantage of because of 100 years of discrimination against farmers of color. They're saying that constitutional rights are being violated. All of this is connected. So we're going to deal with all this on the other side of the break and deal with how black jockeys dominated horse racing, but were pushed out by racism. You just listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, The Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 2nd, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. I want to remind you, you can still register for the online course that I teach. We just had a new section that started up. It started up Saturday, May 1st. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years in history and what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We had a great class on Saturday, May 1st. This is a 9-week, 18-hour online course. It takes place Saturdays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's all online. You can watch in bed. You can see me. I can't see you. You can have your pajamas on if you want to. We do the classes live. We have a live text chat as well, so you can ask questions during the class. All the sessions are recorded. So as soon as you register, you can watch the class that we just did Saturday, May 1st. And then the previous offering of the course, we have that archive as well. You'll be able to watch that also. You can watch from around the world. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. And we deal with thousands of years of history. We deal with ancient Africa. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. And we deal with what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. So we just posted the link here. It's also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Class is regularly $130 on sale, $80. As soon as you register, you can start watching content. And you'll still have access to all of the content once the course ends as well. Okay. All right. So right before the break, we're giving you a brief overview of the topics we're going to cover today, and we're going to jump in dealing with Black Jockeys Dominated Horse Racing. Well, we're pushed out by racism in just a minute here. I was recapping some of the topics that we dealt with Thursday and Friday on our show, and I was dealing with the difference between statements that Senator Tim Scott made on behalf of the GOP, on behalf of the Republican Party, and statements that Vice President Kamala Harris as well as President Joe Biden made, and relating this to policy. The $5 billion that's allocated in the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan for African American farmers and farmers of color. This is being attacked by Republicans. Senator Lindsey Graham, the senior senator from South Carolina, who has 6,000 black farmers in South Carolina, is not doing anything for them. That's not me saying that. That's John Wesley Boyd Jr., president of the Black Farmers Association. Senator Lindsey Graham is calling that allocation of $5 billion racist and saying white farmers cannot take advantage of it. Now, the most important thing about what Tim Scott said in his 14-minute plus rebuttal, almost 15 minutes, I've gone through and analyzed the entire thing, as well as the statements from the entire interview, 6 minutes and about 54 seconds interview that Vice President Kamala Harris did with George Stephanopoulos on Good Morning America. Watch the entire interview, not just the excerpts that are in articles. Watch the entire interview. Also saw the entire interview that Joe Biden did with Craig Melvin on MSNBC or NBC News. Tim Scott, after he said America is not a racist country, said that using race, he said, and I have the exact quote here, he said it's bad to use discriminatory laws to try to address discrimination. Okay, something to that effect is bad. It's using discriminatory laws to address discrimination is bad. What he's doing is he is attacking the Republicans are attacking the $5 billion that's allocated for black farmers and farmers of color. That the most important thing that he said was not America's not a racist country, is what he said after that. Because when you try to use laws and policies to address the racism, Republicans are calling that racist. And this is why they don't want to acknowledge systemic racism exists. Because if you acknowledge systemic racism exists, then the next question you have to ask is, what are you going to do about it? Senator Lindsey Graham, the senior senator from South Carolina, says systemic racism does not exist. Governor Ron DeSantis, we talked about this on Roland Martin Unfiltered on Friday. Governor Ron DeSantis, there was a town hall meeting on Fox News last week, either Wednesday or Thursday, Governor Ron DeSantis was there. They're talking about racism. Is America racist? Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida says systemic racism does not exist. How are you going to deal with systemic racism if you don't even want to acknowledge that it exists? But Governor Ron DeSantis just signed a bill into law that absolves people of any responsibility if they drive into a car and drive into a crowd of Black Lives Matter protesters and hit somebody and kills them. He just signed that bill into law. We'll talk about this on Monday's show. Let's deal with the black jockeys. And this ties into racism, but people don't want to acknowledge racism exists. Racism has nothing to do with not liking people, calling people racial epithets, calling people the N-word. That's bigotry. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, benefits, privileges, land, access to education, access to opportunity, media, healthcare, and they use that, etc. And they use that to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people. Racism comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy for the purpose of preserving genetic white survival. No wonder they don't want to admit it exists. So when we look at the history of African-American jockeys, this takes us back into slavery, and that's something that a lot of Republicans don't want to talk about. Black jockeys won 15 of the first 28 of America's most important horse races at Churchill Downs. In fact, every rider on the track at the inaugural Kentucky Derby in 1875 was African American, except for one. Okay, some sources say 13 out of 15, some sources say 14 out of 15. Okay, the race was won by Oliver Lewis. Now, some accounts say Oliver Lewis was a former slave. He was 19 years old. His trainer's name was Ansel Williamson. Ansel Williamson was a former slave. Now, there was a time when riding a racehorse was almost exclusively a black occupation. And I've done an entire presentation, entire lecture dealing with this. So I'm going to show you some of the slides from my presentation as well, if you don't mind. So there was a time when riding a racehorse was almost exclusively a black occupation. That's something else we got pushed out of. It began with plantation owners using lightweight African-American slave boys to race their horses against rival owners. Some slaves were tied to horses to keep them from falling off, resulting in injury and sometimes death. Now, there are numerous sources you can check out dealing with this, and we're going to go to clip one in just a second, Jalen. There are numerous sources that you can check out dealing with this history. I've looked at a number of them. I've also been on the Kentucky Derby's website and done research there on the Kentucky Derby's website. One article is from SmithsonianMag.com, official website of the Smithsonian Institute. They have a really good article, The Kentucky Derby's Forgotten Jockeys, The Kentucky Derby's Forgotten Jockeys. And if you see Lindsey Graham, or if you see Ted Cruz, or if you see Ron DeSantis, I always find it interesting. See, we have to get the language right, and we have to deal with definitions. So first question I would ask them when they say racism doesn't exist or systemic racism doesn't exist, I would ask them, please define for me racism or systemic racism. So if we look at this article here, the Kentucky Derby's Forgotten Jockeys, African-American jockeys. African-American jockeys once dominated the track, but by 1921, they had disappeared from the Kentucky Derby. How did that happen? How did the horses just all of a sudden get afraid of black men that they didn't want to race for them? No, that's not what happened. It was systemic racism that pushed black jockeys out of horse racing. This is Jimmy Wink Winkfield, who won the Kentucky Derby twice in 1901 and 1902. He was the last African-American winner of the Kentucky Derby. Jimmy Wink Winkfield. Let's go back to I want to go back to my slides here. But that's an article you can check out. Also, if you want to order the lecture I've done dealing with this, we have it at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. When Black Men Dominated Horse Racing. That's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, so here we have pictures of some of the African-American winners of the Kentucky Derby. Oliver Lewis won in 1875. Then we have Isaac Murphy, William Walker, and also Willie Sims, all African-American men. Now, horse racing was entertaining for white owners and for slaves alike, and one of the few ways for slaves to achieve status. What's important for people to understand, you've heard me talk about the history of slavery before, and I deal with how there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865, at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts. If you had a talent that allowed white people to make money off of you, if you could box, if you could wrestle, if you were a jockey, if you could ride horses or something like this, you got an elevated status. Oftentimes you could travel and you can make money yourself. When you watch Roots and you deal with Chicken George helped to raise roosters, okay, and he was involved in cockfighting. He traveled around with his master, played by Chuck Connors, and his master was his father also. It's a whole nother story because Chuck Connors, the slave master, raped Kizzy, okay, Chicken George's mother. So if you had skills like that, right, you could have an elevated status and have more freedoms and travel and sometimes make money. Chicken George made enough money betting on the cockfights, things like this. He was able to buy his freedom. So this is why we really, really need to study the history of slavery in this country and the chronology of this history to really understand what happened and where we are today. So black jockeys won 15 of the first 28 of America's most important horse races at Churchill Downs. Okay, that's where the Kentucky Derbies ran. In fact, every rider on the track at the inaugural Kentucky Derby in 1875 was black except one. That race was won by a former slave named Oliver Lewis. Now, you hear here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF, they're airing what's known as the Triple Crown. The Triple Crown consists of 3 races. Okay, the Triple Crown is not. The Triple Crown is more than the Kentucky Derby. The Triple Crown consists of the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont Stakes. Okay, these are the 3 most coveted races in horse racing. All right, so the Triple Crown consists of 3 races. The Kentucky Derby is the first one, and we were winning all these races. All right, and we were winning races in Europe also. These were some bad brothers. These are looked at as the first African-American athletes. And then after slavery ends, they're still winning. You're going into the Reconstruction era. Now, these colorful characters included Kentucky Derby winners like Willie Sims, who introduced the short stirrup into the profession, Isaac Murphy, the Derby's first 3-time winner, and Jimmy Winkfield, who I just showed you a picture of on the horse, who finished all 4 Kentucky Derbies he rode in the money, winning twice. He won in 1901 and 1902. You have Babe Hurd, H-U-R-D, Soup Perkins, Alonzo Lonnie Clayton, Erskine Henderson, and Billy Walker. These were all African-American men, all Kentucky Derby winners. Are they teaching your children about this in school? I'm just curious. Are they teaching your children about this in school? So the question you have to ask is, well, what had happened? You say, wait a second. Because you think of horse racing, you think of that as a white sport, a white wealthy sport. You don't think of that as a poor man's sport, okay? Horse racing, okay? So you have to ask the question, well, what happened? All right, I want to go to clip 1 here. This is from the Kentucky Derby. This is from the Kentucky Derby's website. And this clip, this did not exist back in 2011 when I started doing research on this, right? But this deals with African American jockeys and the Kentucky Derby. Let's go to this clip, Jalen.
The Kentucky Derby and Churchill Downs have become American institutions since their debuts in 1975, and countless individuals have contributed to their ongoing growth. Prominent among them are the African American jockeys and trainers who helped build the early foundation of success that now spans nearly a century and a half. 13 of the 15 horses that competed in that first Derby in 1875 were ridden by African Americans. When Oliver Lewis guided Aristides to victory for African American training legend and eventual Hall of Famer Ansel Williamson in that first Derby, the victory was one of 15 by African American riders in the first 28 runnings of the race. 3 of those history-making jockeys are enshrined in Racing's Hall of Fame: 3-time Derby winner and national racing hero Isaac Murphy, and 2-time Derby winners Jimmy Winkfield and Willie Sims. Also prominent is William Walker Sr., who was born into slavery and, at the age of 17, piloted Baden-Baden to win the 1877 Derby. During a 60-year career, Walker also trained horses and was a bloodline consultant to John E. Madden, who bred 5 Kentucky Derby winners. Those men, along with fellow Derby winners Lonnie Clayton, Erskine Henderson, Babe Hurd, George Garrett Lewis, Isaac Lewis, and Sue Perkins, were among the brightest stars in American racing before government-sanctioned Jim Crow laws and the poison of racism pushed them from their hard-earned prominence. Their legacy is now restored, and the accomplishments of the early African-American heroes of the Kentucky Derby are honored at Churchill Downs during Derby Week with the annual running of the William Walker Stakes.
All right. So that gives a little background history here on the legacy of African-American jockeys. All right. And it's a little known history. Moor has been talked about in the past few years. I know there was a big article from theroot.com around 2011. You have the article from SmithsonianMag.com that we talked about a few minutes ago. But it's a history that is still hidden. Okay. So when I hear people say, when I hear especially Republicans, say that systemic racism doesn't exist, so we dealt with that before. You dealt with it, but you didn't fix it. It's still here. Then when you try to put policies in place to address systemic racism, then they want to say that's racist. Okay, this is the game that's being ran. All right, so I want to go back to the presentation here. And the calling number is 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 if you have a quick question or comment also. Okay, so if you were a slave who had skills that white people can make money off of, then you could also make some money also. You could have more freedoms and you can make some money as well. So when the first Kentucky Derby was ran May 17th, 1875, 13 out of the 15 jockeys were African American. Among the first 28 Derby winners, 15 were African American. African American jockeys excelled in the sport of horse racing in the late 1800s, but by 1921 they had disappeared from the Kentucky racetrack and would not return until Marlin St. Julian rode in the 2000 race. Are we to believe that horses started hating black people, so they didn't want they didn't want a black jockey to ride them? And then in 2000, all of a sudden, horses started liking black people again. Is that why we got pushed out of horse racing? I don't think that's what happened. See, one of the things that happened was that as long as white men could make money off of us when we were slaves, it was all right. When we can make money for ourselves, and we're winning the horse races after slavery, and we can make money for ourselves, all of a sudden, now it's a problem. All of a sudden, now it's a problem. So African-American jockeys' dominance in the world of horse racing is a history nearly forgotten today. Their participation dates back to colonial times when the British brought their love of horse racing to the New World. New World, new to them, wasn't new to us. Because if you read The First Americans Were Africans, documented evidence by Dr. David Imhotep, and if you take my online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, if you've seen any of the approximately 16 interviews I've done with Dr. David Imhotep, you know that African people were here in this land that we call the United States of America going back at least 51,700 years ago. We were here before Native Americans even came into existence. There's no disrespect to Native American brothers and sisters, because I have Cherokee and Black Crow in my family on my mother's side. I'm just dealing with the history. So it was new to them. It wasn't new to us. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade did happen, but that happens thousands of years later. But it was new to them. It wasn't new to us. So founding fathers, or as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing called some of them, the fondling fathers, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson frequented the racetrack. And when President Andrew Jackson, the white supremacist Andrew Jackson, who was Donald Trump's favorite president, surprise, surprise, when President Andrew Jackson moved into the White House in 1829, he brought along his best thoroughbreds and his black jockeys. He was a white supremacist. Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Okay. He signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Also, Lewis Cass, that Cass Tech is named after, former slave owner Lewis Cass. Now, some people say he only owned one slave. Okay. Lewis Cass was involved in the Indian removal, in the removal of the Choctaw, Chickasaw Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians off their land in southeastern United States. So when some people say Cass Tech needs to be renamed, and I'm one of them, I'm a graduate of Cass Tech. People who respect themselves don't name their institutions of learning or higher learning after their oppressors. They don't name institutions of higher learning after people who work to oppress their people and keep their people enslaved. They name their institutions after their freedom fighters and people who work to freedom. That's just a side note there. You can do some research on that. So when President Andrew Jackson moved into the White House, he thought African people were mentally inferior. He signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830, pushed the Choctaw, Chickasaw Creek, and Cherokee and Seminole Indians off their land in southeastern United States, forced them to go over 1,000 miles out west into Oklahoma, what's known as the Trail of Tears. And about a third of the people that were with those 5 Native American nations, about a third of them were African people. But he loved his black jockeys. So in 1829, President Andrew Jackson, when he moves into the White House, he brought along his best thoroughbred horses and his black jockeys. Because racing was tremendously popular in the South, it is not surprising that the first black jockeys were enslaved Africans. I wonder how much money these enslaved Africans made for these white people. And many of their descendants now tell us to get over it. Well, that's because you got over on us. See, it's easy to say to get over it when you got over on us. It's easy to say move on when you got something to move with. All right. So this is Oliver Lewis. Oliver Lewis won the Kentucky Derby in 1875, May 17th, 1875. The odds were good in the first Kentucky Derby that an African-American jockey would win the prestigious contest, and Oliver Lewis did so. Oliver Lewis was the very first Kentucky Derby winner. His horse named Aristides was the trainer of his horse. Aristides was a former slave named Ansel Williamson. In addition to this famous first, Oliver Lewis became an analyzer of racing data. He became an analyzer of racing data. His work became very influential in the forming of modern race charts. So not only when you study the history of this, not only were these brothers winning the horse races, but they're going to change horse racing. They're going to change the style, because we bring style and flair and swagger to whatever we do. They're going to change horse racing. Now, this is Jimmy Wink Winkfield, who lived from 1882 to 1974. Jimmy Wink Winkfield. Okay, he wins the Kentucky Derby twice. In 1901, at age 19, in 1901, at age 19, Jimmy Wink Winkfield captured his first Kentucky Derby title astride a horse named Eminence. He went on to win 161 races that year. 161 races in 1901, including key victories in the Latania Derby on Hernando, and Tennessee Derby, where the horse Hernando, and the Tennessee Derby, where he rode Royal Victor. Okay, there's a article about Jimmy Wink Winkfield at blackpass.org. These brothers were not only winning horse races, but they changed horse racing. They revolutionized horse racing. Here's Jimmy Wink Winkfield in 1902 winning the Kentucky Derby. While these were spectacular accomplishments, he returned to the Kentucky Derby in 1902. So he won in 1901 and 1902. And won the most important race of his career in 1902. 1902 was the last time an African-American jockey won the Kentucky Derby. So much for systemic racism doesn't exist. Now, this is William Walker. William Walker won the Kentucky Derby when he was 17. Now, William Walker won the Kentucky Derby in 1877 aboard the horse named Baden Baden. Walker's most famous race at Churchill Downs came in 1878 when he piloted Teen Browick to win over the horse Molly McCarthy in a famous match race. William Walker was considered an expert in thoroughbred breeding and bloodlines. Eventually, he became an advisor to John E. Maiden, breeder of 5 Kentucky Derby winners. Okay, this is information right from derbymuseum.org. So when you study our history, see, we had, when you look at the 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865, even though we're here for tens of thousands of years before that, but just look at that period of time. We had experience working with animals and raising animals and things like this. So many of the best trainers were African Americans also. Somebody needs to do a study on how much money did African American jockeys make white people. How much money did African American jockeys make white people? Not just their trainers, but the white people who are betting on them. All right, I want to bring up this other picture here. Let's see here. Okay. Calling numbers 313-778-7600 if you have a quick question or comment. Also 313-778-7600 if you have a quick question or comment. All right, I want to go back and look at some more of this information here. And I'm looking, I have notes on this, but also my presentation. So I'm going to go back between the two of them. So please forgive me in advance on that. So after the Civil War, which had devastated racing in the South, many of the tracks destroyed and a lot of the South destroyed, things like this. Okay. Emancipated African-American jockeys followed the money to racetracks up north, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Now, these colorful characters included Kentucky Derby winners like Willie Sims, who introduced the short stirrup to the profession, Isaac Murphy, Babe Hurd, Soup Perkins, Jimmy Wink Winkfield. And these were usually very young men, sometimes many of them still in their teens. Isaac Murphy turned pro at age 14. Isaac Murphy turned pro at age 14. Alonzo Lonnie Clayton won the Kentucky Derby at age 15. Jimmy Wink Wingfield won his first Kentucky Derby at age 19. 2 years later, William Walker, who I just showed you a picture of, and we have a picture of William Walker up right now. William Walker won the Kentucky Derby at age 17. This is Willie Sims over to the right. He's on his horse. Looks like he's on his horse, has his hand up in the air. That's Willie Sims. There's Isaac Murphy. Okay. All the way to the left is Oliver Lewis, who won the first Kentucky Derby. Then we have Isaac Murphy. These were some bad brothers. Now, Isaac Murphy became the first jockey to win three Kentucky Derbies in 1884, 1890, and 1891. This is a few years after, 15, 20 odd years after slavery ends, in 1865. Okay. He wins three Kentucky Derbies, Isaac Murphy, 1884, 1890, and 1891. And he won an amazing 44% of all of the races that he rode in. He rode an amazing 44% of all of the races that he rode in, a record still unmatched today. I want to go to clip 2. We're going to go to clip 2 for a few minutes before the break, Jalen. Also, if you like this type of information here, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You're not going to get a lot of this type of information many other places. When you do it through Cash App, be sure to type in $ the AHN Show, and it'll say Michael and show my picture there. Let's go to clip 2, Jalen. This gives some more background history on African American jockeys and horse racing.
African American jockeys were a huge part of the very first Kentucky Derby in 1875. 13 of the 15 jockeys were African American, and of course the race was won by an African American jockey, Oliver Lewis. Even beyond that, 15 of the first 28 runnings of the Kentucky Derby were won by African American jockeys.
In the 1800s, the institution of slavery created a workforce that helped make Kentucky the center of the horse racing universe.
Slaves were taking care of the horses in all facets. That included even jockeys. So the original jockeys were slaves. You'll hear names like Simon, a very prominent slave jockey who rode a horse named Haney's Maria, who beat General Andrew Jackson's horses on several occasions. And it continued as we get past the Civil War in 1865.
Without the black jockeys, there would have been very little racing in Kentucky. And Kentucky became the mecca of African-American jockeys. Willie Sims was from Georgia. Alonzo Clayton was from Kansas. But they all came into Kentucky to gain their reputation.
Well, when we look at some of the jockeys that dominated the very earliest Kentucky Derbies, Jimmy Wingfield, who won 2 Kentucky Derbies. Isaac Murphy is probably the name that you're going to hear most associated with dominant jockeys in the early Kentucky Derby. Not only was he was one of the greatest jockeys really of all time and is still recognized as such. The first jockey to win 3 Kentucky Derbies and was the very first jockey to be admitted to Racing's Hall of Fame in 1955.
Isaac Murphy gained a reputation as a gentleman. He was also known for his great love for his wife, Lucy.
A lot of jocks back then, nobody thought anything about throwing a race. He never threw a race. He was known for his honesty. That if you put him up on a horse, that he would do the best he could to win.
All right, pause right there, Jalen, and back it up about a minute or so. We're going to pick this up on the other side of the break. And this is Isaac Murphy. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, his wife was black. Okay. You listen to that. Because I know somebody was sitting there wondering, was his wife black? Yes, she was. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Detroit, 910 AM Superstation, a division of Adele Media. The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 910 AM Superstation or Adele Media.
All right. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 2nd, 2021. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. If you have a quick question or comment. We know the Kentucky Derby ran on Saturday, May 1st, 2021. And we're dealing with some of the history of African-American jockeys who dominated the Kentucky Derby. Okay. And a lot of people don't, know about this history. So the race on May 1st was won by John Velasquez, whose horse name was Medina Spirit. And as I said before in the first hour, Medina Spirit should not be confused with Funky Cold Medina. Okay, Medina Spirit, right? Should not be confused with Funky Cold Medina. Okay. But Funky Cold Medina will raise your spirit, okay? But it's not the same as Medina Spirit, who won the Kentucky Derby, okay? But there's a joke in there about well, let me see. How should I? No, I shouldn't say that. There's a joke in there, right, about being drunk on Funky Cold Medina and a horse, a woman that looks like a horse looking like a winner, but we're not going to go there. All right. 313-778-7600 is the calling number. If you have a quick question or comment, we'll go to the phone lines in just a minute here. So right before the break, I was sharing a clip here, and this is dealing with some of the history of African Americans in horse racing. This is African American jockeys from Kentucky Life, KET. African American jockeys from Kentucky Life, KET. And here we see Isaac Murphy. So Isaac Murphy won the Kentucky Derby 3 times. Okay, Isaac Murphy is one of the greatest jockeys in the history of thoroughbred racing. Now, you don't hear a lot about Isaac Murphy. And I truly really need to hear this history. See, this is America has to have a massive history lesson. See, when I hear Republicans, white and some African Americans, Republicans, who say systemic racism doesn't exist, like Senator Lindsey Graham says systemic racism doesn't exist. He said that recently in interviews. They don't want to deal with history like this and how these brothers were pushed out of racing. They don't want to deal with the history of slavery and racism and Jim Crow segregation. Some of them think that talking about the history of racism is racism. Some of them think talking about the history of racism is racism. No, it's not. We're dealing with what happened. Now, when Jews talk about the Holocaust, they don't say talking about the Holocaust is promoting the Holocaust. They understand what happened to Jews and Afro-Germans because Afro-Germans were being killed by Hitler and the Nazis. Afro-Germans, sterilization was taking place of Afro-Germans. We talked about that here on this show. But nobody says that if you talk about the history of the Holocaust, then that's somehow promoting the Holocaust and promoting what happened to the Jews. No. You teach the history to keep a catastrophe like that from happening again. But when the Holocaust did not take place here in the U.S., it's easier to talk about it. Because you can say that happened over there. That happened in Poland. That happened in Germany. That happened in France. That happened, you could say it happened there. The Auschwitz, okay? The concentration camps. They were in Europe. They weren't here. But when the Holocaust takes place here, then the descendants of those who engineered the Holocaust, many of them don't want to talk about it. When the Holocaust takes place here, many of the descendants of those who engineered the Holocaust and benefited from it financially. Many of them don't want to talk about it. They want to say we already dealt with that. Systemic racism doesn't exist. So this is Jimmy Wink Wingfield. I'm sorry, this is Isaac Murphy. Isaac Murphy is one of the greatest jockeys in the history of thoroughbred racing. He won the Kentucky Derby 3 times. First 3-time winner of the Kentucky Derby was an African-American man. Imagine that. He won in 1884, 1890, and 1891. Isaac Murphy won in the traditional upright English style at a time when most American jockeys rode in the more common seated position. Okay? These brothers are going to change horse racing. They're going to change how people dressed. Okay? The type of stirrups they wore. All different types of things like this. These brothers are going to revolutionize horse racing. Okay, let's go to the phone lines quickly. Let's go to Marathon, line 1. Marathon, welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from, Marathon.
I'm calling from Tool Productions in Detroit.
Okay.
I was fascinated by the program. I'm an entertainer, and I'm understanding my place in the world and why whites are interested in what I'm doing.
Okay.
And it's more clear to me now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
So I have to.
Go ahead.
I have to be wise in my choices.
You have to be what about your choices? Wise about your choices?
Or who I partner with.
That is true. That is true. All right, brother. We're getting some feedback. All right, brother. Keep listening, Marathon. Thanks for calling. Okay. All right. Let's go to Carl quickly on line 2. Carl, welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from, Carl.
Yes, I'm calling from Southfield, Michigan.
Southfield, Michigan. Okay,
yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. You're absolutely right. The Holocaust, African Americans here, it happened to our people. The problem is that to end all this racism in this country, you never gave us our reparations. And the black folks, African Americans, yes, we can get our reparations. In several ways we can get it. It's all the laws that's been put on the books, all the segregation laws. White folks, white American citizens have made laws, segregation laws, slave laws, etc., to hurt other citizens of the United States. How is that so? How can you be a citizen here in America that we're protected under the Constitution, Bill of Rights, all the amendments, and a whole group of other people? And here's the thing about it. White folks in this country, a lot of them didn't come into this country until after World War II, and then it came in when they came to Ellis Island in the 1800s. So black folks, they get rid of white supremacy. See, that's why when you hear that, where I have worked and went to school with white folks and racist white folks, say same thing. But here's the thing: to get rid of white supremacy in this country, you have to pay us reparations. I got the bill on it. I know everything needs to be dealt with that. For policing, you have to pass that George Floyd crime bill. Now, I'm interested to see how the
George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is in the Senate right now.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
So, because I just want to say one more thing. See, when police fill out not all police, but you have tens of thousands. You've got over 1 million law enforcement in this country, 18,000 agencies in this country. You got at least around about 30% police in this country is corrupt. That's being real, because I'm an American citizen. I know my country. I know how racist this country is. Jim Scott sit up there and said America, and Kamala Harris says it's not a racist country. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
If you saw my show Friday, we went through and dealt with their comments, and we dealt with the totality of their comments. What Vice President Kamala Harris is saying is much different than Tim Scott. Tim Scott, in his 14-minute plus speech, did not acknowledge that systemic racism existed. And then when you put policies in place to address systemic racism, Tim Scott said that it's backwards to use discriminatory policies to fight against discrimination. We'll talk about this some more Monday. What they said are two entirely different things. But thanks for your call. Keep listening, Carl. Okay. People, go to Good Morning America. Go to gma.com and watch the entire 6-minute and 54-second interview that George Stephanopoulos did with Vice President Kamala Harris. Watch the entire interview. Watch it at the beginning when she talks about one of the biggest threats to America is white domestic terrorism. Tim Scott didn't say that in his rebuttal speech on behalf of the GOP to the speech that Joe Biden did. That wasn't Tim Scott's rebuttal. People have to understand. He delivered the rebuttal on behalf of the GOP to the speech that Biden delivered to a joint session of Congress. Now, he agrees with some of that stuff, but you have to understand what he's saying is how most of these Republicans think. This is why most of them are saying systemic racism don't exist. Most of the Republicans are saying systemic racism does not exist. Therefore, when you put policies in place like the $5 billion that's going to farmers of color, especially African-American farmers, that's in the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, Republicans are calling that racist. There was a lawsuit filed Thursday, April 29th, the day after Biden gave his address to the joint session of Congress, and Tim Scott delivered his rebuttal on behalf of the GOP. There was a lawsuit filed by white farmers claiming that the $5 billion going to African-American farmers and farmers of color is racism. And they said they're being discriminated against because they can't take advantage of the 120% loan forgiveness and take advantage of the money. They skipped the 100 years of racism that caused the remedy that had to be put in place. We talked about this on our show Friday. If you miss any of our shows, go to our website, African History, go to our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook. Go to my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. They're all there because we broadcast there. Okay? So we have to understand this. This is why you have to understand policy and politics. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. There was an article from the Columbus Dispatch. I'll try to find that article. We're going to go back to the clip here in just a second. So we have Isaac Murphy here. And then Isaac Murphy won an amazing 44% of all of his races, which is a record still unmatched. We have Alonzo Lonnie Clayton. Alonzo Lonnie Clayton was 15 years old when he won the Kentucky Derby in 1892. And when he became the youngest rider to win the Kentucky Derby in 1892 at age 15. He was born on March 27th, 1876 in Kansas City, Missouri, to Robert and Evelyn Clayton. On May 11th, 1892, Alonzo Lonnie Clayton won the Kentucky Derby, where he recorded a time of 2 minutes 41 seconds, riding the horse named Azra, A-Z-R-A. He also set a record as the youngest rider to win the prestigious race. Let's go back to this clip here, Jalen. This deals more with African-American jockeys and horse racing from Kentucky Life, KET. Let's go to this clip.
Was from Georgia. Alonzo Clayton was from Kansas. But they all came into Kentucky to gain their reputation.
Well, when we look at some of the jockeys that dominated the very earliest Kentucky Derbies, Jimmy Wingfield, who won 2 Kentucky Derbies, Isaac Murphy is probably the name that you're going to hear most associated with dominant jockeys in the early Kentucky Derby. Not only he was one of the greatest jockeys really of all time and is still recognized as such, the first jockey to win 3 Kentucky Derbies and was the very first jockey to be admitted to Racing's Hall of Fame in 1955.
Isaac Murphy gained a reputation as a gentleman. He was also known for his great love for his wife, Lucy.
A lot of jocks back then, nobody thought anything about throwing a race. He never threw a race. He was known for his honesty. That if you put him up on a horse, that he would do the best he could to win.
While few relics remain from this era of racing in the African-American jockey, the Kentucky Derby Museum in Louisville has one that actually reminds us where the term for the winnings of a horse race originated.
Well, the museum is very fortunate to have some artifacts directly related to great jockey Isaac Murphy. One is a silk purse from the 1891 Kentucky Derby. The significance of that purse is that it would have contained the winnings for that race.
In the post-Civil War era, the racing was a business that crossed racial lines between owners and jockeys. For them, there was only one color.
If you get a jock who rides a horse and wins, you tend to want to stay with him. It's like they said on a racetrack, the only color that counts is green. I'm certain race was an issue when people came to betting. I'm not naive about it, but the thing about it is on a racetrack that you got to remember, if the best jock out there is a black jock and you want to bet on a white jock because you don't like black jockeys, you're literally going to be paying for your own prejudice because the black jockeys were enormously talented, just as gifted as their white counterparts.
Churchill Downs has the names of the horses who won the Derby, ridden by African Americans like Alonzo Clayton, Willie Sims, Billy Walker, and Soup Perkins.
Everybody talks about his name, Soup. James Soup Perkins. James Perkins was his real name. But he was a very young jockey. He entered the racing industry at the age of 11, started really seriously making a name for himself at the age of 13. He lived in a house on Thomas Street, which was just behind the Kentucky Association racetrack over in the East End. And he talks about having jumped the fence to go into the racing paddock, into the stables. His brothers, William and Frank, were trainers, and his father, John Jacob Perkins, was also a trainer.
Like many African Americans in the area who worked at the racetrack, Soup Perkins is buried in the African Cemetery No. 2 on 7th Street. Tombstones, many weathered by time, tell their stories. Some tell of their occupation, like this bugler. One unidentified soul is marked simply with a horseshoe. It is the home to the first Derby winner, Oliver Lewis. Another tombstone shows how young these riders were. And one shows how appreciated the jockeys were to the riding stable. But sadly, one tombstone was removed. It now stands in the Derby Museum. Isaac Murphy's body was removed from the cemetery, eventually to be buried alone at the Kentucky Horse Park, next to the statue of Man of War. While considered to be an honor and to share with the world this great name in horse racing, Isaac's beloved wife Lucy was left behind at the African Cemetery No. 2. Her body was left unmarked, forever lost, forever separated from her husband. As America grew into the 20th century, the era of dominance by African American jockeys finally came to an end. First, as many former slave families migrated to the cities, but also with changes on the racetrack.
During the last part of the 1890s, there was much contention between the black and white jockeys, and the racing industry became very dangerous for them.
As racing becomes a more lucrative profession and being a jockey becomes a more lucrative profession, more white athletes are interested in the races and being a jockey. And we have record in the early 20th century of many African-American jockeys like Jimmy Winkfield, the last African-American jockey who won the Kentucky Derby. He was a victim of rough riding, and there are instances where he was in a race and jockeys were getting close to him, roughing him up, running him up against the rail, trying to intimidate him on the racetrack. When that starts to happen, trainers are reluctant to use African-American jockeys because they think it's a disadvantage to their horse. So you have just the outright racism of that time period that contributes to it.
Okay, so that's some more background information in history dealing with African-American jockeys and how they were pushed out of horse racing. We'll talk about this some more on the other side of the break. This is the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, May 2nd, 2021, and we are live. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a quick question or comment, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a quick question or comment, be sure to follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. And also follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. And we rebroadcast these various shows throughout the day as well, okay, on my social media platforms. If you'd like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, and also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. We have Pam, Tracy, Sherwin, Sharon. There's a few of the people watching us on our social media platforms. A question came up in the chat about the online course that I teach. Somebody said that they work on Saturday. Okay, we do the classes live. All of the classes are recorded. All of the sessions are recorded and archived. You can go back and watch it anytime. You can watch from around the world. So if you have to work on Saturday and can't join us live in the class, not a problem. You can watch the class whenever you get ready to. Even after the 9-week course is over with, you'll still have access to the course offerings, okay? So that's my online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And you can register at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and we'll post a link here. As soon as you register, you can watch the class that we did Saturday, May 1st. And then the previous course that we did February and March, you can watch that as well. All right, let's go back to the topic dealing with African-American jockeys. Black jockeys dominated horse racing, but were pushed out by racism. Black jockeys dominated horse racing, but were pushed out by racism. Oh, also, I found an article from the Columbia Dispatch I was looking for. We talked about this on my show Friday. This deals with white farmers who are suing the U.S. Department of Agriculture, suing the federal government, okay? White farmers sue seeking loan forgiveness. Now, this is backlash from the $5 billion being allocated in the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. This is backlash. This is what Senator Lindsey Graham has been talking about. Senator Lindsey Graham has been attacking the $5 billion, saying it's racist, okay, and saying that if you're a white farmer, you don't get anything. You don't get the loan forgiveness. Senator Lindsey Graham is ignoring previous 100 years of history that caused African-American farmers largely to lose 92% of their land, 12 million acres. We go from about 1 million African-American farmers in 1920 to about 45,000 today. Senator Lindsey Graham and other Republicans, including Tim Scott, are ignoring what Tom Vilsack, the new Secretary of Agriculture, said in an interview with the Washington Post on May 25th, 2021. We talked about it here on this show. Okay. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack says only 0.1% of Trump administration's COVID farm relief went to black farmers. Only 0.1%. Where's Senator Lindsey Graham? Where are all these Republicans calling the $5 billion in the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan racist? Where were they when $26 billion was handed out from the Trump administration and African American farmers got 20.8 million? They got 1/10 of 1%. Where are all these people saying systemic racism doesn't exist? Of those who identified their race or ethnicity, black farmers received only 20.8 million of nearly $26 billion in 2 rounds of payments under the coronavirus food assistance program announced by the Trump administration in April of 2020. Where are these people saying systemic racism doesn't exist? 26 billion African-American farmers got 1/10 of 1%. This is one of the reasons why John Wesley Boyd Jr., president of the Black Farmers Association, this is why he's saying spineless Lindsey Graham owes the black farmers an apology. Okay, and he's correct. We talked about this here on the show Friday. Go watch Friday's show where we got deep into it. Friday, April 30th. Black farmer Lindsey Graham must apologize for racist comment about subsidies kept from farmers of color for years. John Wesley Boyd Jr. is calling out punk-ass Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is doing interviews saying systemic racism does not exist, but he wants to ignore the past 100 years of racism coming from the federal government that caused black farmers to lose 92% of their land. From 1930 to 1939, black farmers lost over 200,000 farms. This is during the Great Depression. When white farmers were able to get loans from the federal government to save their farms and mechanize their farms, we were denied a lot of those subsidies, and we lose our farms. Read the book How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy, 3rd edition. How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy, 3rd edition, page 72. It deals with the Farmers Home Administration, created in 1930. This is under the Herbert Hoover administration. This is at the beginning of the Great Depression. The stock market crashes October 29, 1929. The Farmers Home Administration, the FHA, created in 1930. At the end of legal slavery in 1865, blacks were concentrated in the agricultural sector of America. They were more likely than whites to own farms, though they held less acreage and had poorer quality tracts of land. Despite this reality, the Farmers Home Administration was set up in 1930 to give loans and subsidies to white farmers to sustain and maintain their operations. To achieve this unstated racist purpose, the Farmers Home Administration allowed local white farmers to operate the program, and they, not the federal government, decided who would get the critical benefits. As a result, black-owned farms, unable to compete with the well-subsidized, black-owned farms, unable to compete with the well-subsidized and well-financed white farms, fell dramatically from about 900,000 in 1930 to 682,000 in 1939. It goes from 900,000 in 1930 to 682,000 in 1939. Many of the whites farmers used the government money to modernize their farms by buying tractors and evicting black sharecroppers during the Great Depression. The U.S. Congress amended the law to say that half of the money should go to those tenant farmers, but the white landholders simply stole the farmers' payments, claiming, if they were asked about it, that debts were owed. This is why they want to say systemic racism doesn't exist. Because they don't want to deal with the history. Because if you acknowledge systemic racism exists, then the next question is asked is, well, what are you doing about it? So they want to do presto changeo, hocus pocus. Systemic racism doesn't exist. We already dealt with it. When? All right, let's go back to the black jockeys who were pushed out of horse racing because of systemic racism. That doesn't exist. Okay, so we talked about Oliver Lewis and Alonzo Lonnie Clayton. Now, let me see. We've got Isaac Murphy. Willie Sims, born 1870, died in 1927. Willie Sims won the Kentucky Derby twice, 1896 and 1898. Willie Sims is also the first jockey to win a race with an American horse at an English race course and is credited with introducing the short stirrup riding style to England. These brothers are going to revolutionize horse racing also. All right. Now, I want to deal with what happened. How did they get pushed out of horse racing? Did the horses just all of a sudden say that we're white supremacist bigots now and we don't want black jockeys riding on our backs? Okay. Did they say they said, black man, get off my back? Did they say, get your knee off my neck? What happened? So the money ultimately led to the demise of African American jockeys. According to researcher Kenneth Wisenton, Wisenton, a retired sociology and business librarian from the Martin Luther King Jr. Public Library and Howard University's Founders Library in Washington, D.C., he says, quote, black jockeys did not just vanish from horse racing, they were banished from horse racing. Black jockeys didn't just vanish from horse racing. It wasn't presto change, or where'd they go? I don't know what happened. Who knows? Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows. It wasn't like what happened to them. No, it was systemic racism. Now, as the thoroughbred horse racing industry grew in America, so did the size of the winning purses. So did the money. Follow the money. And the prosperity of black jockeys increased as the money increased. Why be damned? Why people got jealous? Now, as long as we were making the money when we were slaves, it was all good. But when we can make money for ourselves, right? When we make money for ourselves, it's like, hold on. No, we get to keep more of the money too. Slavery's over with. No, we get to keep more of the money. Oh, now all of a sudden it's a problem. Less talented and envious white riders conspired to get in on the take. They conspired to get in on the take. This was a concerted effort. Now, New York Times had an article from 1900, the year 1900. Name of this article was Negro Jockeys Shut Out. Combination of white riders to bar them from the turf. This is from the New York Times in the year 1900. It told the whole story. Negro jockeys shut out. Combination of white riders to bar them from the turf. So the New York Times article begins, quote, the decline of the Negro jockey has been so apparent since the season of 1900 opened that even the casual racegoer has had an opportunity to comment upon it. The public generally accepted the theory that the old-time favorites of African blood had outgrown their skill and really were out of date because of their inability to ride up to their form at the form of past years. Okay, 1900, they're saying African blood. The public generally accepted the theory that the old-time favorites of African blood had outgrown their skill and really were out of date because of their inability to ride up to their form of past years. The article went on to say, quote, racing men know better. Racing men know better. As a matter of fact, the Negro jockey is down and out, not because he could no longer ride, but because of a quietly formed combination to shut him out. Because of a quietly formed combination to shut him out. So the Negro riders got mounts at first. The Negro riders got mounts at first, but then failed to win races. Somehow or other, they met with all sorts of accidents and interferences in their races. There was a concerted effort by white men to conspire to sabotage their horses. When riding on the track, other riders would try to bump them to knock them out the race. The means employed to shut out the black riders are said to be that whenever one of the prescribed jockeys participates in a race, there is a concerted action there is a concerted action by all the white boys to bring about the defeat of the horse ridden by the Negro. This is a quote from the New York Times in 1900. This is why you have to study history. It helps you to understand what happens today. And historical events don't happen in a vacuum. Okay, historical events don't happen in a vacuum. They are the culmination of a sequence of historical events. And also, a people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. All right, let's continue here. So it goes, the means employed, quote, this is from the New York Times, 1900. The means employed to shut out the black riders are said to be that whenever one of the prescribed jockeys participates in a race, there is a concerted action by all the white boys, their word, not mine, to bring about the defeat of the horse ridden by the Negro, end quote. The singular ill luck, ILL, the singular ill luck of black riders serves to remind possible employers that owners who expect to win races would only put up white jockeys. So they're saying, if you want to win, if white owners of the horses, if they want to win, then don't run black jockeys anymore, because we're going to sabotage them. We're going to run them out. They're going to be death threats. We're going to run them out of town and you're going to lose your money. Okay, so put white jockeys in. There was a concerted effort to force African-American jockeys out of horse racing. Alonzo Lonnie Clayton was arrested. Let me see here. Do we have that in here? Okay. Check out this article from theroot.com called Silks, Saddles, and Discrimination. Silks, Saddles, and Discrimination. It gives some more of this background history. Alonzo Lonnie Clayton, and we're going to pull up this picture again of Alonzo Lonnie Clayton. He was arrested shortly before post time at Aqueduct Racetrack, and falsely accused of trying to fix the race. Okay? This is what they're doing to black jockeys. Because we're renting the horse races. You had some of these brothers making $20,000 a year in the late 1800s, early 1900s. These brothers short in stature, larger than life. These were like the first prominent African-American jockeys. So Alonzo Lonnie Clayton gets arrested at Aqueduct Racetrack shortly before post time and is accused of trying to fix the race. A near riot broke out as barred black jockeys fought with white riders in Chicago. The African-American jockeys who remained in racing were reduced to exercise riders, hot walkers, and stable hands, raking horse manure from barns. The once unsurpassable Alonzo Lonnie Clayton passed away at age 41. He was a bellboy at a Los Angeles hotel in 1917. This brother won the Kentucky Derby at age 15. He dies at 41. Some of them live tragic lives because they lost their fortune. They're forced out of horse racing. They have to go rake manure and become stable hands, all different types of things like this. Well, it's because of systemic racism. It wasn't because they didn't like the money. So white people are going to unionize. White men are going to unionize. The white jockey union movement started in the North and worked its way through the Midwest and then the South. For that reason, Jimmy Wink Winkfield was still able to ride and win the 1901 Kentucky Derby, okay? And in 1902, and this is Jimmy Wink Winkfield right here. This is Jimmy Wink Winkfield running in 1902, winning the Kentucky Derby. He won in 1901, and then in 1902, he won the Kentucky Derby and became the last African-American to win the Derby. He ran his last race in the Derby in 1903, placing second before Churchill Downs succumbed to the pressure of the white union. A few African-American jockeys left the United States and went to Europe, where they extended their careers. Jimmy Wink Winkfield was the most successful to do this, winning every major race on the continent of Europe, including Russia's Moscow Derby, France's Prix du President, and Germany's is a big race in Germany's Grosser Preis von Baden in Germany. Jimmy Wink Winkfield made and lost several fortunes. In Russia, he lived in the Moscow National Hotel, owned a skating rink, and held 4% of Russian railroad stock. This is Jimmy Wink Winkfield. Okay. He lived in the Moscow National Hotel, owned a skating rink, and held 4% of Russian railroad stock. He developed a fondness for caviar at breakfast and chauffeur-driven Duesenberg cars. Legend had it, if you were an American tourist and bet on a race that he did not win, you simply brought your betting ticket stubs to the hotel dining room where he would buy them back. Because horse racing was tremendously popular in the South, it is not surprising that the first African-American jockeys were slaves. They cleaned the stables and handled the grooming and training of some of the country's most valuable horses. From such responsibility, African slaves developed the abilities needed to calm and connect with thoroughbred horses, and these were skills demanded by successful jockeys. Now, because of racism, though, and white people became jealous of the money they were making, they were forced out of horse racing. The rising scourge of segregation began seeping into horse racing. And then you have Plessy versus Ferguson, U.S. Supreme Court case of 1896. And we're going to look at that here quickly. All right, so you have racism seeping in to horse racing and segregation because of Plessy versus Ferguson, U.S. Supreme Court case. Let me flip back over here to the slide. All right. So Plessy versus Ferguson, U.S. Supreme Court case of 1896 legalizes segregation, separate but equal. You have economic recessions of the period that take place. And the economic recessions shrunk the demand for black jockeys as racetracks closed and attendance fell. You had an intensified competition for horse mounts. Violence on the racetracks against African-American jockeys by white jockeys prevailed without recourse. Jimmy Wink Winkfield received death threats from the Ku Klux Klan. You had anti-gambling groups that campaigned against racing, causing more closures, okay, and also more closures of the racetracks. And then also the northern migration of African Americans, so the Great Migration, 1915 to 1970, the northern migration of African Americans from southern farming communities further contributed to the decline of African American jockeys. But largely, you had a unionized effort of white men to force African Americans out of horse racing as well. So these are contributing factors. All right. Okay. Also, if you want to order the lecture that I've done dealing with black jockeys and horse racing, that's at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. That is how black jockeys dominated horse racing, then were pushed out. But what's the name of that one? When black men dominated horse racing. That's the name of it. When black men dominated horse racing. We'll post the link here also. Okay, I want to go to the second topic here. We also have the bundle pack, 6 DVD bundle pack. What's the name of that one? Black Migration 1619 to 2019. Black Migration 1619 to 2019. That's a 6 DVD bundle pack. And the lecture dealing with when black jockeys dominated horse racing, that is one of the 6 DVDs in that bundle. We also have it in digital download format also. So that's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Let's see here. We'll post the bundle here. Okay, yeah, here we go. All right, I want to go quickly to this next topic here because I wanted to deal with this earlier in the week and did not get a chance to discuss it. This deals with efforts at the state legislature level to somehow deal with reparations. Okay. And we hear more talk about reparations. Now, some of the talk is just nonsense. Others is more realistic. Okay. It takes 218 votes to get any bill passed in the House of Representatives. We had Cam Howard from NCOBRA, National Male Co-Chair of NCOBRA, here on the show a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we dealt with H.R. 40. And we know H.R. 40 passed out of the House Judiciary Committee. Okay. We don't know when it's going to go to the House floor for a full vote. I don't think you had 218 votes in the House of Representatives to pass it. All the Democrats are not on board with H.R. 40, even though a majority of them are. You have between 173 and 190 Democrats that will vote for it. No Republicans are going to vote for it. Not even Burgess Owens of Utah, who's in the House of Representatives. He's black, but he don't think like it. Okay, he's not voting for reparations. Senator Tim Scott, Black Tea Party Republican from South Carolina, he already said he's not voting for H.R. 40. He's not voting for reparations. So when it goes to the Senate, it's dead on arrival in the Senate. You're not going to have 60. You need 60 votes in the Senate to pass H.R. 40. I don't even think you have 40. No Republicans are going to vote for it. If the black Republicans not going to vote for it, how many white Republicans you think are going to vote for it? It's not going to happen until maybe 2023, because you're going to need 60 votes. So you're going to have to vote a lot of Republicans out of office and vote people in the office who support H.R. 40. I don't know any Republicans that do. Maybe you know some, but I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any Republicans in the Senate say they support H.R. 40. So this next article here, this next topic, this deals with despite racial reckoning, states stall on reparations. Despite racial reckoning, states stall on reparations. Okay, imagine that. So during the summer of 2020, reckoning over racial injustice and decades-long debates about whether to offer reparations to the descendants of enslaved Africans, okay, in the U.S., that whole debate gained momentum. And we go back to June 19th, 2019, in the House of Representatives. The House Oversight Committee. There was a hearing on reparations. Burgess Owens spoke there. Okay, he said he was against reparations at the hearing. And then the one that just happened in February, he spoke there again, said he was against reparations. So did Larry Elder, African American conservative talk show host. He said he's against reparations as well. But state lawmakers in California, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, and Oregon, where Democrats control the legislatures and introduce or hope to receive proposals to study the possibility of reparations. it turns out the wait for reparations will continue because these efforts are stalling. These efforts are largely stalling in the state legislatures. All right, let's look at this article here. Can we close that? All right. So in the state efforts, so the state efforts have mostly stalled, raising the question about whether they can win enough support, to succeed on a wide scale basis. Now, California is the only state to approve a commission to study reparations statewide and how they might work. Okay, California is the only state out of California, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, and Oregon. California is the only state to approve a commission to study reparations statewide and how they might work. Now, Juanica Fisher, a Democrat who introduced the legislation in the state of Maryland, said, "We need a federal reparations bill, but I don't know when we'll get there." Me either. She said, "We need a federal reparations bill, but I don't know when we'll get there." And she's a Democrat who introduced the legislation. She's a Democrat who introduced the legislation in Maryland. Okay, now, the state efforts have mostly stalled, raising questions about whether they can win enough support. Let me scroll down here just a second. She said, hopefully we will win, but I think the states, hopefully we will win, but I think states should be accountable. Yeah, states that have slavery, you know, they should be accountable. The biggest success is going to, well, you can do short term at the state level. The most results are going to come from the federal level. Now, that mirrors the outlook in Congress. A committee in the U.S. House of Representatives, which is controlled by Democrats, advanced a decades-old bill that would establish a reparations commission, but its prospects appear dim in the evenly divided Senate, 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans, where it's unlikely to generate enough support to overcome a filibuster, where you need 60 votes. You're going to need 60 votes in the Senate. That doesn't exist right now. A lot of legislation and the things we work on are all band-aids on the issue of institutional racism, class inequality, and the host of other issues that stem from that, said Fisher, who plans to reintroduce her bill next year. But we've never fully tackled what's at the heart. What's the cancer? What's the disease? Okay, you're done with racism and white supremacy. The lack of progress reflects the nation's conflicting views on whether reparations to atone for slavery are necessary. A 2019 Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs research poll found that the vast majority of African Americans, 74%, favored reparations, but less than a fifth of white Americans favored reparations. I wonder why. What don't they understand history? I'm trying to tell you, most Americans don't understand history. Okay. All right. Those watching on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Keep watching. We're going to keep going for a few more minutes. Remember, right now is correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. All right. Stand by. Okay. We'll continue for a few more minutes. So we have the bundle pack, Black Migration 1619 to 2019. Black Migration 1619 to 2019. And that's at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. That also includes we have it on the homepage of our website as well. And that includes the presentation when Black men dominated horse racing. It's the full presentation. It's a visual presentation. It includes some of my other presentations as well. One dealing with Black migration, 1619 and 2019. Also, 6 principles of political self-defense. Understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. Ancient Africans in America, before Native Americans, before Columbus or slavery, from Kemet to Wakanda. I have one dealing with the history why African Americans switched from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party, that whole history going back to the Lily White movement in 1928. Also, one dealing with the whole history of Juneteenth as well. Okay, this is a 6 DVD bundle pack. You can order them individually also. Down below, we have the individual lectures that are in the bundle pack also. So that's on sale, $45. We have that in DVD and digital download format at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. I want to go back quickly here to this article. I'm trying to squeeze everything in. All right. How you all doing today? Okay. So a 2019 Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs research poll found 74% of African Americans support reparations, but less than 1/5 do not. It's not just reparations for slavery, it's reparations for slavery and the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, redlining, discrimination, etc. The continuation, what happened after slavery, that brings us up to the day and deals with the structural inequities today. It's not just for slavery that ended 156 years ago. Maryland resident Linda Davis believes a lack of education on the subject of slavery keeps many white Americans from supporting the effort. She's correct, because most Americans are woefully ignorant of history, regardless of race. A lot of our people still think Willie Lynch historically existed. Willie Lynch never historically existed. Okay. Linda Davis believes a lack of education on the subject keeps many white Americans from supporting the effort. And Linda Davis is white. She belongs to Coming to the Table, a national organization made up of descendants of those who were enslaved and slave holders. Coming to the Table, a national organization made up of descendants of those who were enslaved and the descendants of slave holders. Linda Davis said, I think getting people to make that leap is sometimes a challenge. Okay. And she submitted a written testimony in support of the state reparations effort. She said it's trying to help people see the ongoing harms, like this summer. I think summer 2020. I think more white people are getting in now, which is hard because it seems like people should have gotten it before now. I think more white people are getting it now. I think more white people are getting it now. She said, which is hard because it seems like people should have already gotten it before now. Now, Linda Davis points to local efforts as an example of what grassroots activism around the issue of reparations can achieve. In March, we talked about Evanston, Illinois here in March. In the reparations program, the city council passed to deal with a history of redlining. It's not dealing with the history of slavery. It's dealing with a history of redlining because slavery did not exist in Evanston, Illinois. Evanston, Illinois was founded in the 1840s, and slavery was abolished in Illinois in 1818. And I interviewed, right here on this show, I interviewed Fifth Ward Alderwoman Robin Ruth Simmons, who was the one who spearheaded the reparations initiative in Evanston, Illinois. So go watch that entire interview, and we get deep into the history and actually what happened and why they dealt with redlining and the whole proposal that they put together dealing with redlining. That is based upon a 77-page study dealing with the history of redlining in Evanston, Illinois. That wasn't just something they pulled out of the air. That was based upon research. That dealt with that information came from a 77-page study. And I have the study here somewhere. That came from a 77-page study that dealt with the history of redlining in Evanston, Illinois, and the effects of redlining. So a lot of people were commenting on it and didn't do the research and didn't know what they were talking about. I can't find it. It's somewhere around here. But go watch that full interview. Now, this document right here, this study, you've heard me talk about it before, and I use this also in the online class. In some of my lectures, I reference it. Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. Teaching Hard History, American Slavery from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. This is about a 52-page study. This thoroughly documents how the history of slavery is being incorrectly taught in schools all across the country. And then it lays out numerous recommendations on how to more correctly teach that history. And they did a survey of 1,000 high school seniors, and they found that America's school children know very little about the history of slavery. They found that only 8% of high school seniors surveyed could identify slavery as the central cause of the U.S. Civil War. They found that only 2/3, or 68%, did not know that it took a constitutional amendment to formally end slavery, the 13th Amendment. Only 22% of high school seniors surveyed could correctly identify how provisions in the U.S. Constitution gave advantages to slaveholders, like Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, known as the Three-Fifths Compromise, which dealt with apportionment, determining how many seats in the House of Representatives slaveholding states would have, and also dealt with taxation. Okay, so you can go to Southern Poverty Law Center's website, splcenter.org, splcenter.org, and search for Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. You can download that. You can download the study. I took it to a printer, got it printed. Also, the chair of the advisory board that put this study together is Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries. Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries is a nephew of one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, and I've interviewed Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries here on the show also. I think every school and every school district in the country should be using this study. If they did, they wouldn't do things like mock slave auctions, and they wouldn't engage in a lot of these exercises that are traumatizing to African American children when it comes to slavery. It tells you don't do things like slave reenactments and mock slave auctions, etc., because that's traumatizing to students, especially African American students. Okay, so check out the rest of this article here from thegrio.com. We're almost out of time here. Check out the rest of this article. Despite racial reckoning, state efforts stall on reparations. Despite racial reckoning, state efforts stall on reparations. And this is why the state legislature and voting the right people into the state legislature are so important also, as well as the governor, because the bill has to be signed into law, has to be signed into law by a governor. I bet you if Stacey Abrams had become governor of Georgia, she would have vetoed Senate Bill 202, the voter restriction bill in Georgia. Okay, I bet she would have vetoed Senate Bill 202. Lastly, let's look quickly at this article here from this one from face-to-faceafrica.com. Germany is returning to Nigeria bronze artifacts and bronze statues. Okay, you may have we posted about this on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. Let me flip over to this, and also quickly here, also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, right on the homepage, it has the information for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. That's right on the homepage as well. Okay, so we'll pull that up quickly. So when you go to the homepage and scroll down, you see the information for radio show on 6 days a week. Click here to listen to audio podcasts of the shows. Click here to read articles I've written. This is the March 15th show where I dealt with Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion performing WAP at the Grammys and Negative Corporate Control Hip Hop. Information here. Okay. Click here to register. We did class 1 on March 1st. Click here to enroll. As soon as you're registered for the class, you can watch the class on March 1st. Okay. And the course offerings we did in February and March. You can watch that as well. All right. I want to look at this last article here. This is from face-to-faceafrica.com. I saw an article from CNN Africa about this as well. And then also I have one here from the BBC. So Germany is returning to Nigeria artifacts stolen by the British. Germany is returning to Nigeria artifacts stolen by the British. All right, this is from April 30th, 2021. Here's some artifacts right here. The Benin Ethnological Museum in Germany holds more than 530 pieces of the famous Benin artifacts stolen by the British troops as they colonized what is now Nigeria. Okay, as they colonized what is now Nigeria. Now, Germany will now return to Nigeria artifacts that were stolen in 1897 by troops in the thick of British colonization efforts in the West African country. It was announced by German Culture Minister Monika Grütters on Thursday, April 29, 2021. The Ethnological Museum, alone in Berlin, holds over 530 artifacts in this category. After they were looted, Britain auctioned many of the artworks to museums in Europe and in the United States. Okay. Over the last decade, there have been calls supported by many European politicians to return the artifacts to Nigeria. Now, I suggest you also give back the money that you got from selling the stolen artifacts in the first place. You're going to give back the artifacts. You're going to give back the money too? I suggest you do. The Ethnological Museum, alone in Berlin, holds over 530 artifacts in this category. After the British looted these artifacts, Britain auctioned many of the artworks to museums in Europe and in the United States. So they made money off of the looted artifacts. Now, announcing the deal reached with the Nigerian government, Grütters said her country wanted to, quote, contribute to understanding and reconciliation with the descendants of those whose cultural treasures were stolen, end quote, during the European occupation of Africa. The artworks that will be returning to Nigeria from 2022, the year 2022, are usually collectively called the Benin bronzes, although some are made of ivory. Now, what about the money? What about the money that you made from auctioning off stolen artifacts from my ancestors? What about the money? Show me the money. Yes, send the artifacts back, but we should get some of that money too. The Benin Kingdom of old is not related to the Republic of Benin, even if some of the peoples in the modern sovereign state are descendants of the Benin people who flourished between the 11th and 16th centuries on the west coast of Africa. Since the beginning of the last decade, there has been increasing international pressure on European and American museums to give back Africa's priceless pieces of cultural heritage. This was dealt with a little bit in the film Black Panther in the museum scene. Okay. This dealt with a little bit in the film Black Panther from Marvel Comic Universe, Black Panther. In 2018, the French government released a report by a commission it had set up to investigate the matter of returning stolen artifacts in French ownership. Senegalese economist Thelwine Sarr, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce the name, and French historian Benedict Savoy concluded that some 90% of known material arts of ancient Africa are outside of the continent. Now, I remember when that study came out because we posted an article at the African History Network on Facebook about this. Okay, some 90% of known materials of ancient Africa are outside of the continent of Africa. They're in these European-controlled museums. It was the first time the weight of the matter had been put into quantifiable perspective. Yet for those who had hopes that restitution would be quickened, they have been disappointed. For those who had hopes that restitution would be quickened, they have been disappointed. Although museums and countries have said they are committed to returning the artworks, the process has been slow. How about returning some of that money that you made from the stolen artworks? One of the reasons for this has been attributed to the unavailability of technological conditions in African museums to receive the artifacts. That notwithstanding, the calls have continued to come in. The British Museum, which holds nearly 1,000 Benin artifacts, says it is, quote, committed to facilitating a permanent display of Benin material, end quote. They are committed to facilitating a permanent display of Benin material. But they have not explained how this will be facilitated. So check out this article here from face-to-faceafrica.com. Germany is returning to Nigeria artifacts stolen by British colonizers. Germany is returning to Nigeria artifacts stolen by British colonizers. The British colonizers, doesn't that include the royal family? Remember when I said Meghan Markle married into a family of colonizers? And I said, I'm not calling them colonizers because they're white. I said, I'm calling them colonizers because Great Britain 100 years ago colonized 1/5 of the world's population. 100 years ago, 1/5 of the world's population lived under British rule. So I'm calling them colonizers because they colonized 1/5 of the world population. Okay, I'm not calling them colonizers because they're white. I don't want you to misunderstand this. I'm calling them colonizers because they colonized 1/5 of the world population. All right, well, look, guys, we have to, brothers and sisters, we have to get out of here. Remember to register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. It meets Saturdays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Saturdays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It meets all around. You can watch from all around the world. It is an online course. All the sessions, we do the class live. All of the sessions are recorded, so you can go back and watch it over and over again, okay? All the sessions are recorded, so you can go back and watch it over and over again. And next class is going to be Saturday, May 8th, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. We had a great class Saturday, May 1st. As soon as you register, you can watch the class from Saturday, May 1st. And I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, everything. Okay. All right, we have to get out of here. Remember, the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. If you want to advertise with the African History Network, also email us at AHNshow at African History